Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. This is our fourth year of celebrating our national treasures. History has recorded that it was on the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th hour that the surrender to the Allies ended the First World War. The war to end all wars was signed. The celebration on this day was declared by President Wilson as Armistice Day. Our program today seeks to express our pride in those who have served and those who serve today. We are honored and proud to present our color guard today from Patrick Air Force Base, Florida, the United States Air Force Color Guard. Please stand. Please remain standing for our national anthem. Chief. Now the national anthem, if you please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color Guard. Although in the minds of many, World War I was the war that was to end all wars, but since that time, we have defended our country and our freedoms in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and currently Afghanistan and Iraq, with threats from North Korea, Syria, Iran, and other nations around the world who think that we as Americans threaten their existence. Right now, I'd like to recognize all of our veterans who are serving. Our veterans are serving presently in the armed forces. And if you just stand up very briefly, we'll ask members from the Army, please. Thank you. The Marines, if you'll stand, please. Thank you. The Navy. Thank you. The Coast Guard. Admiral, thank you. Are there any merchant mariners here? They were a great part of our force, and we don't see them very often anymore. And of course, the Air Force. Thank you, guys. We're pleased and we are really honored to have the Navy Band with us under the direction of Chief Musician Joseph A. Randall. It's been my privilege to work with many of the military bands and have met musicians from many of those bands and many of the other command bands. These musicians can perform with any professional musical organization, any place, anytime, anywhere. We are proud to have these better than first-class men and women representing us in the States and around the world. Please show your appreciation of their service to our country. As the first musical salute to our national treasures, the Navy Ceremonial Band will now present American We by Henry Fillmore, followed by one of my favorites, The Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa. Yeah, gives you goosebumps, don't it? John Haddix of the Martin County Veterans Service Office and Tony Reese of the Martin County Services Office have been, now I can see, instrumental in today's program. At this time, it is my pleasure to ask John Haddix to introduce our featured speaker. Please welcome John Haddix, Chief of the Veterans Service Office.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? It's an honor and a privilege to introduce our guest speaker. Rear Admiral Leroy Collins, Jr., United States Navy Reserve retired, is the Executive Director of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. He was appointed by Governor Charlie Crist and the Florida Cabinet on January 18, 2007. The Admiral directs a state agency that is responsible for assisting without charge to the claimant Florida's 1.8 million veterans, their families, and survivors, and improving their health and economic well-being through quality benefit information, advocacy, education, and long-term health services. His department also operates the state of Florida's 5 veterans nursing homes and 1 assisted living facility. A native of Tallahassee, Florida, Admiral Collins received his commission from the United States Naval Academy in June 1956. His naval career began with a tour aboard the amphibious transport USS Calvert, APA 32, followed by submarine officers basic course in Groton, Connecticut, and duty aboard the submarine USS Chivo SS 341. In 1961, he served as an analyst for naval intelligence in Washington, D.C. He was then assigned as the ballistic missile weapons officer aboard the newly commissioned nuclear-powered fleet ballistic missile submarine USS James Madison, SSBN 627. After a brief stint working missile test operations at Naval Ordnance Training Unit in Cape Canaveral, Florida, he transferred to the fleet or to the reserves in 1966. While a reservist, he commanded the coastal minesweeper USS Thrush, MSC 204, and later served as commanding officer of various Navy Reserve submarine units. From 1978 to 1979, he was the liaison to the Florida National Guard and later served as the commanding officer of the Navy Liaison Unit at the U.S. Readiness Command at MacDill Air Force Base, Florida. From 1985 to 1987, he served as the commander, Naval Reserve Readiness Command, Region 8, and then was assigned as the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations Reserve for Logistics at the Pentagon until his retirement from the Naval Reserve as a 2-star Rear Admiral in 1990. In 2006, he was a candidate for the Republican nomination in Florida for the United States Senate. It is my pleasure to present to you Rear Admiral Collins.
Thank you, John. What a wonderful turnout. Stewart's always been a favorite place of mine, but I found out when I came here today that you've grown a lot since I've last been here. It's, I would like to discuss several things with you here today. John gave most of my speech, and so I've written some other things down here. First of all, I think you should know what an honor it is to serve Florida veterans. We are the second largest population of veterans of any state in the nation. We're second only to California, and within 10 years we'll be the largest. The in-migration to Florida by veterans, 50% of veterans who are moving anywhere are moving to Florida. And that imposes a real responsibility because they have needs. The character of the veterans are changing. We're losing our World War II veterans at a very fast rate. And we're racing against time to try to capture as many of their stories as we can. that represents a dilemma, because those who were the closest to the events we're trying to recall and capture typically want to speak the least. My cousin was one of those, and I need to relate a sea story associated with him, because I think it's illustrative of the way those folks are, the greatest generation. My cousin John Gwynn was a infantry officer, and he reported aboard his platoon. He took over command of a platoon in, I think it was Holland or Belgium, just before the response to the Battle of the Bulge. And he was a brand new platoon commander. And he had, whatever experience he had, when he came back, he wouldn't talk. And he lived right next door to me, so I knew him very, very well, and he wouldn't talk to me about any of that. About 3 years ago, I went and visited John, and by this time, John's getting in his late 70s. I said, John, have you ever gone back to Europe to see some of those places where you were involved in combat? I said, no. And he says, I don't want to. I don't want to relive any of those experiences. So about June of this year, this job associates me with veterans on a regular basis. And I find out that I can get these wonderful stories from these men and women if you'll just ask them and evidence some sincerity and listen to them carefully. They don't want anything a quick hit, because this is in many cases is painful for them to go back and relive these stories. So at this meeting, I was addressing the blinded veterans. Most remarkable thing, sitting around a room about this size for dinner. Some of them are totally blind. About a third of them have a dog sitting right under the table with them. But they're there. They know each other. They know each other by sound. Wonderful, wonderful people. It's kind of hard to watch them eat sometimes because they eat with both hands, but that's what they have to do. And so after I had finished my presentation to them, one of them came up to me and said, I noticed you were introduced as a native of Tallahassee. He says, do you know John Gwynn? I said, well, yes, that's my cousin. I said, can you tell me something about him? Because he won't tell me anything. And so he said, yes. He said, I can. He says, John was my platoon commander. And he said, he was very new on board, and when we went up to the battle line to start repulsing, sending the Germans back, as I recall, the high point of the Battle of the Bulge is right at the River Meuse, right there between Belgium and Germany, I guess it is. He said when the first day on the line, an 88 came in and caught the company commander, very first day. Wiped out the company commander. But they were on the advance. They didn't have time to get another captain in there. So they fleeted up a platoon commander. It wasn't John, it was one of the others. About 3 or 4 weeks later, they got that platoon commander. John became the company commander as a second lieutenant. Now, I didn't go much further than that, because this guy said we had a very, very tough time. It wasn't because of John. John saved us. But he said, I can understand why he doesn't want to say anything about it. None of us do. So I mentioned that just, I guess the kind of the end of that story is John died about 3 weeks ago. And I asked his son, I said, George, did he ever tell you anything about this? He said, not a word. Now, we're living with that, and these are rather extraordinary people. And while I want to respect their desire to stay quiet, we're using, in our department, we're using all the means we can to make them feel comfortable about sharing their stories with us, because there's a World War II Institute at Florida State University, run by Dr. Olson in the history department, and we are slowly getting these stories and sharing them with him, because we have about 680 veterans that are in our nursing homes here in this state, and they are wonderful, wonderful people. About 30% of them have Alzheimer's, but the rest of them are they're just, and we have to take special care with them. But the others are more available to us, and so they've earned that care, and we're doing our best to do the job that they deserve, to give them a dignified environment for the rest of their life. In addition to nursing homes, our department is responsible for maintaining a group of veterans who are experts in the VA benefits. And on top of the VA benefits, there are benefits which our state makes available to our veterans. And we have a group of about 25 people who are expert in determining what those benefits are and who is entitled to them. It's a rather laborious process. It involves lots of money. It involves a lot of delay. But it's a process we must go through. On one hand, we're protecting the taxpayers' assets. On the other hand, we are doing our best to determine who is eligible for what, based upon very specific laws which determine how those proceeds are to be shared. I want to recognize some. This occasion has given me some unique opportunities. Just as I walked in the door, well, just in the first hour I was here, I met a former shipmate that I hadn't seen in 51 years. Yeah. He saw in the paper or something I was going to be here, and he made a special trip down here to see me. That was fun. My Naval Academy classmate, Howie, and his wife Jane Burdick are right here. Howie and I go a long way back. We go back 51 years. We go back longer than that. Go back to the summer of '52. And it's wonderful to have you here, Howie and Jane. Dan Mangello is, I don't know if Dan's here. I saw him about an hour ago. There he is, right back there. Dan and I were in submarines together. And so as I go around to the state like this, I come across folks like that, and the memories just start flooding back. You know, submariners can only speak in acronyms, and Dan started throwing a bunch of them out there today, but I kind of went back there. You know, the EPCP, I remember what that is, Dan, you know. Okay. I want to tell you a sea story about a band. When I came and saw we were going to be privileged to be here with the band from Navy Southeast. By the way, I rode by your headquarters the other night, NAS Jacks. They add so much to every occasion. And I had an occasion where I was leading the Sink Plant Fleet Band. And I was with them for 2 weeks. And let me tell you how that transpired. Our Navy has gotten progressively smaller, albeit each ship is more capable. But when I came, and Howie and I came in the Navy, this was during the Korean War. The Navy consisted of about 2,000 ships. In World War II, it's 5,000 ships, U.S. Navy. By the time we got to Vietnam, we had 1,000 ships. Today, we're down to 270. Now, each one of them, you know, when they start costing over $1 billion a piece, well, you understand you got to be a little careful on how you spend your assets. But each one of them is far more capable. But because that dwindling supply of ships and afloat platforms, I was tasked when I was Commander of Naval Reserve Region 8, which headquarters is just a few blocks down the street from where you folks have your headquarters. I was asked to take the Sinclair Fleet Band and to go to South Africa. And I said, well, why are we doing that? They said, well, we don't have enough ships to visit. Our rules are that we have to have a Navy presence in all countries around the Atlantic Basin, and we don't have enough ships to go around, so we decided to send a very expendable reserve rear admiral along with the Sinclair Fleet show band in a 40-year-old airplane. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. So off we went. Well, it was a great thrill because I found out we visited 5 countries in South Africa, or not in, well, in Southern Africa. It was Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea and Gabon and Sao Tome. Anybody know where Sao Tome is? Okay, you do. Were you on that trip? Gee. You must have been one of the junior members of the band. But, and then there's one other country, I can't remember which one it was. But it was in Nigeria, which has a fairly large Navy, that I was with the Chief of Naval Operations for the Nigerian Navy. They have the largest Navy between South Africa and Gibraltar. So he pulled me aside. He says, Admiral, let me see. Would you explain something to me? You've been in the Navy over 30 years, and your command now is a band? I said, no, sir, but I'll go with that group anytime. They were wonderful. The idea was to show the flag, and the band, wherever a band goes, you get a huge amount of attention. And so they didn't come to hear the Admiral, they came to hear the band. And I understand that. That's the case here today as well. I understand that. I want to tell you another sea story about a guy you have here locally. Is Joe Crankshaw here? You know who he is? Yeah, okay. Well, he may have thought I'd tell this story, but I'm going to tell it since he's not here. Joe Crankshaw was the very first person to interview me as an editorial, part of an editorial board when I ran for the U.S. Senate last year. And in the process of doing that, he told me a story about his service, which all of you need to know. And I asked him by email, I said, have you told your story? Well, no, I can't do that. I said, well, okay, I'm going to do it. Joe Crankshaw was part of the group that was mustered on very short notice to go to South Korea to stop the advance of the North Koreans who were invading South Korea in the summer of 1950. Joe was in a battalion that, and as I recall, there were tanks, T-34 tanks coming down south, driven by the, I guess, the North Koreans and Chinese and Russians or whoever. But we didn't have tanks there. So here these infantry battalions were out there to stop these tanks. And I think the largest thing they had was a 2.5-inch bazooka or something, which was not big enough. Joe is one of about 40 survivors out of an entire battalion. And you need to know that. Next time you see Joe, thank him for his service. He doesn't always write what you and I like, but he's a good guy, and he's helped defend this country. And that's what counts. So next time you see him, tell him I told a sea story about Joe Crankshaw. I would also like to tell you something that I'm doing in my role with the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. We have launched a very aggressive effort to try to capture these personal histories. And when I go around to the nursing homes and so forth, I ask the administrator of the nursing home, I said, tell me who was here that I could interview. And because I'd like to capture the histories. If I don't want to force anybody to do something they don't want to do, but if they would talk, I'd like to talk with them. Just a couple of weeks ago, in a space of about 5 days, I interviewed a Marine down in Pembroke Pines, 86 years old. He was a survivor of Guadalcanal, Saipan, Peleliu. He was in the first wave in Bougainville, Tinian, and Iwo Jima. And the guy's sitting there, and he has one leg missing. He lost it from diabetes, not from combat. And we go through this story, and I say, well, what did you hear? Once you dug that foxhole, what did you hear? He said, well, occasionally we'd hear a sniper bullet here and there, and then all of a sudden you get these bonsai charges and stuff like that. This guy's sitting there remembering that, tears pouring down his face, because he's a survivor, and he knows a lot. A lot of them did not survive. That's fairly typical. Then I go up to our nursing home in Daytona Beach. A couple of days later, interview a Army Air Corps. Guy is about an E3 or so at the time. He was on a B-25 the morning of D-Day. I said, tell me what that was like. Well, he says, we mustered in there about midnight. We launched at 3 o'clock, because you know in June it gets light pretty early. And we made our bombing runs at medium altitude. The B-17s and B-24s are up higher. And, the fighter guys were down lower. He said, the weather was terrible. He said, but every now and then, you had a chance to look through a little hole in the clouds, and as far as the eye could see, looked like thousands of ships. That was D-Day. And he was part of it. He's proud of it. Then there's a third guy. I talked to him in Lake City, as I recall. He was at Pearl Harbor on the day of the attack. Sunday morning, he was eating breakfast in the mess hall, and this first wave came in, about 8 o'clock or so, 7:50 or whatever it was. And he knew something was going on, so he jumped up and ran and got his weapon, which is a .45, and then ran down to the flight line. No transportation. He ran down to the flight line. He was about an E3 on the flight line. And all the planes were clustered together. He was in the A-20 squadron. Anybody know what an A-20 was? Very light bomber, twin-engine bomber. All these planes were clustered together to minimize the exposure to a sabotage attack. But wow, were they ever sitting ducks for strafing runs? And so by the time he gets there, the first wave is kind of over. And he picks out, he's a flight crew guy, a flight line guy. So this is the guy that chocks the airplanes and moves them around. He doesn't fly the airplanes, certainly not a pilot, but he knew how to start them up. So he gets in this airplane, this A-20 that's not yet damaged, cranks that sucker up, and he taxis it over. He says, where shall I put this thing? Just get it out of this cluster. He starts taxiing it out there, and he said, these guys are strafing, so I think I'll put it under a tall tree. So he tacks over to the edge of the airport under a big coconut palm and puts it under that tree, blows a tire, but he saves the airplane. Small story, but that guy's a hero. Smart. So I'm telling you this because you need to help us gather those stories. The World War II Institute at Florida State has achieved sufficient credibility that Tom Brokaw put his manuscript for The Greatest Generation is there. So I would invite you to participate in I'd like to tell you why I have this job. On the campaign trail last year, I didn't know Charlie Crist before. I knew who he was, but I didn't know him personally. And so there were several places along the way that we would speak together. And he told me later, he said, I voted for you. And I said, well, I voted for you too. And so he called me on the Saturday morning preceding Christmas. And he said, are you still interested in public service? I said, well, it involves you. Yes, sir. And so he said, could you come up and see me next week? I said, yes, sir, I shall be there. And I got so excited about going to see Charlie Crist, I got pulled for speeding. And so on the way up there, I got pulled for speeding over between Brooksville and Homosassa. I just came off a 70-mile-an-hour road, and I went onto a 60-mile-an-hour road, and yet it was still split, and so I got back up to 75 miles an hour. And sure enough, this cop pulls me over, highway patrolman pulls me over, and he says, what's your hurry? And I said, well, I'm going to a meeting with the governor-elect. And he thought for a minute, and he said, he kept writing, however. And he said, well, tell him we're out here doing our job. Yeah, thanks, guys. I would like to say in closing here that what an honor it is to serve our veterans. Governor asked me several months ago, he said, are you having fun in this job? I said, Governor, that's not quite the right word. I said, when I am with our veterans, I said, it's a history lesson every day. And it's a new history lesson every day. And it just is as inspiring as it can be. I said, thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve in this job. And I love it. I would like to say that our department is in the process of a transition from nursing homes and advocacy to the problem is a little different now because the veterans that are returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, many of them are badly injured. The flak jacket is the body armor is protecting their body, but the arms and legs and head are taking one heck of a load. And many of them, especially the head injuries, we're going to be taking care of those folks for 60 and 70 years, and we owe it to them. We're doing some very innovative things to try to help that brain rewire. But when you go over at the Haley Center, the Haley Hospital in Tampa, and we have dinners there, potluck dinners every third Thursday, I think it is. And those who are ambulatory come down to meet with us. And if they can even be moved, they'll be there. And you see some badly maimed young people, men and women. Let me give you an example of one that this guy, it was just shocking. His head looked like somebody hit him with a meat cleaver. And his head is missing from up above one ear to about here. So about a third of the scalp is missing. There's depression down in the inside that scalp. That is where 40% of his brain used to be. Now, we've got to do our best to see if we can help that young sergeant rewire. He's up at Bethesda right now getting a new scalp graft. His mother is with him because his wife couldn't take it. His wife's back home with 3 kids. She has a job. Mother quit her job to come. These are real hardships. And these were caused because the orders that we sent that guy in harm's way. And if he comes back in poorer condition than he left, we have a duty
to take care of him. And we're going to do it. We are going to do it. We're not going to do it as fast as everybody wants us to do it, but the VA is the second largest department in the U.S. government, second only to the Department of Defense. And we spend $75 billion there every year. And we're going to spend whatever is necessary to take care of people like that who render service to this country. I want to leave you with a quote from George Washington that addresses that. This goes a long way back, but listen carefully. And I quote, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional as to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation." Let's remember that. Thank you so much. I enjoyed being with you.
I've got to find my place. There we go. I'm going to read this. This is a letter by an anonymous Marine author. And it came through the Admiral's email is where I found it. His website. Well, it was on electronics, but anyway. This is the diary. I got to make this through anyway. The diary of a last and final flight home, February 17th, 2007, 0330. I was curbside at 24th and Washington, D.C., 16 degrees with a light breeze. Going home after my second week of freezing temps to my warm home in Southern California, take a walk on the beach, ride a horse, climb a mountain, and get back to living because I'm tired of the cold. 0425, paying the taxi fare at Dulles in front of the United Airlines counter, still cold. 0450, engaged the self-service ticker machine and delivered my ticket, baggage tag, etc., etc. There's a Marine over there, all dressed up in his dress blues, a bit early in the morning. "Good morning, Captain, you're looking sharp," he said. "Thank you, sir." Past security and to my gate for a decaf coffee and 3 hours sleep. A quick check of a flight status monitor, and we're on time. I'm up front, so how can that be? There's that same Marine. He must be going home to Pendleton or to see his lady at LAX for the long weekend, all dressed up like that, or maybe not, I don't. The speaker system announces, attention, the boarding area. We'll begin boarding in 10 minutes. We have some additional duties to attend to this morning, but we'll have you there on time. You remember this, Admiral? The Marine captain has now been joined by 5 others. Bingo. I get it. He's not visiting his lady. He's on official escort duty. I remember doing that once, Keiko duty. I still remember the names of the victims in the family, the Bronco family in Mojave, and all of them was 25 years ago. Board 0600, good morning, folks. This is the captain this morning. We've been attending to some additional duties, and I apologize. 10 minutes late for a pushback, but I believe we'll only be on time at LAX. This morning, it's my sad pleasure to announce that First Lieutenant Jared Landecker, USMC, will be flying, excuse me, will be flying with us and we have the honor of returning him home along with his mother, father, and brother. Please join us in making the journey comfortable for the Latiker family and their uniform escort. Now sit back and enjoy your ride. We're not expecting any turbulence until we reach the Rocky Mountain area, but we'll take care of that. Click Channel 9. Good morning, UA 211. You are cleared to taxi takeoff and cleared to LAX as filed. 4 hours and 35 minutes later, over Big Bear Mountain, the AB 320 makes a left roll and a steep bank to the right. Nice touch, nice tribute. 5 minutes out from the landing, captain comes on the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, after landing, I'm asking that you stay in your seats and yield to the Latiker family so they can depart the aircraft. Thank you for your patience. We are 20 minutes early. On rollout, I noticed red lights, emergency vehicles approaching. We're being escorted directly to our gate. No waiting, not even a pause. Out the left window, a dozen Marines in full dress blues, a true class act by everyone down to a person. Way to go, United Airlines, for doing their things right. Air traffic control for getting the message, and to all security personnel for the display of brotherhood. After departing the gate, I found myself with 30 others from our flight looking out the lobby window back at the plane, not a dry eye. It was one of the most emotional moments I've ever experienced. We all stood there silently and watched as Jared was taken by his honor guard to a waiting hearse. Then the motorcade slowly made its way up the ramp. I realized that I had finally seen the silent majority. It is deep within all of us. Black, white, brown, yellow, red, purple, we're all children, parents, brothers, sisters, etc. We are an American family. Official report, February 7th, 2007. Amber Province, Iraq. First Lieutenant Jared Latiker, United States Marine Corps, from Big Bear, California, gave his life to his country, fatally wounded when his CH-46 helicopter was shot down by enemy fire. Jared and his crew all perished. His life was the ultimate sacrifice of a grateful family and nation. His death occurred at the same time as Anna Nicole Smith, a drug-using person with a 7th grade education of no pedigree, who dominated our news for 2 weeks while Jared became a number on CNN. And most unfortunately, Jared's death underscores a fact that we see. We're a military at war, not a nation at war. It has been said that the Marines are at war, America is at the mall. First Lieutenant Latiker, a man I came to know in the skies over America, on 17th February 2007. From me to you, aviator to aviator, I am unbelievably humbled. It was my high honor to share your last fight. God bless you. Semper Fi. Thank you, Admiral. And now the Navy Band is going to play two of our a famous march by John Philip Sousa. First, El Capitan, and then, Chief, I didn't write it down. Sir. No, we'll take the Armed Forces song. Thank you. Okay. How many of you knew the words to all of those? Do I get a prize? Thank you, Chief. God, you guys are good. Okay. Where was I? It's Tony's turn. At this time, it is really a pleasure for me to introduce to you the Assistant Veteran Services Officer here in Martin County, Tony Reese, as he presents a very special award.
Good morning, or afternoon, I'm sorry. Where did they go? Lou, where's Flo? Flo, I need you. You can take a couple. Okay. Okay. All right. Lou came in to see me in January of 2003, and he said, Tony, I want to see about getting the Prisoner of War Medal because I want my family to know what I've been through, and I want it official. He told me that several other fellow soldiers had already received their medal for the same capture. As Lou spoke of his experiences, I knew that he was actually there, and I knew I had a former prisoner of war sitting at my desk. Lou Lavisa was part of the intelligence and reconnaissance platoon of the 261st Infantry Regiment. It was on a foggy May morning in Austria in 1945 that he and other members of his platoon found themselves in the hands of the German Waffen-SS unit. Fortunately for his platoon, their release was quickly negotiated. However, the events that led up to and during his capture were very traumatic and haunt him to this day. During the 4.5 years of untiring efforts by Lou, there were several denials, and several times Lou thought this will never happen. But he persisted, and even though his recognition is 62 years late and 4.5 years in the works, this wrong has been corrected. Lou has been awarded a favorable decision by the Army Board of Corrections and Military Records, and his records have been corrected to reflect that he is officially a former prisoner of war and awarded the Prisoner of War Medal. Lou, it is with great pleasure and an honor, and I must say about time, that I present you with the Prisoner of War Medal as authorized by the Secretary of the Army. You're welcome to.
I'd just like to say a very few words. Without the efforts of Tony Reese here, I never would be receiving this medal today. He worked and worked, and when I long gave up, he continued, and I want to thank him in front of everyone. Thank you, Tony.
Our final musical selection today but we want them to sing with us. God bless America. Can we do that? All of us together.
God bless America.
Thank you, Jim. Now you got the idea. Our final musical selection, including the band and choir, if you don't mind, all together we're going to sing God Bless America. And you can stand as we sing if you'd like. Stand beside her with the light from above, from the mountain to the valley, to the ocean, wide with all. God bless America, our sweet home. God bless America. Land that I love. Stand beside her, I can't hear you, and guide her through the night with the light from the mountain to the valley. What? Home, sweet home. From the mountains to the valley.